With two B&M coasters already getting rebuilt and retracked, we have to start thinking which coaster from B&M will become the next Incredible Hulk or Nemesis. Or will the park opt to just remove the ride altogether and not rebuild it? Here are my predictions for every B&M model that is over 25 years old. Starting off with the world's best B&M coaster, and that is Iron Wolf, which is located at Six Flags Great America. Now, that's when the ride first opened in 1990, and since then you can find this coaster as a floorless one at Six Flags America. And just when you think that I'm old, Firebird at Six Flags America is the oldest B&M coaster there is. So, is Six Flags America going to decide to replace it with an all-new track? Basically what it means is the ride might keep some of the supports, but B&M would manufacture all new pieces of track for the coaster, and basically it's the same exact ride, it's just going to extend the life for another 20, 30 plus years into the future. So will parks decide to do this? That's the biggest question, and will Six Flags decide to do this? And I think it goes without saying that Firebird offers the best capacity for any coaster at Six Flags America. And for a park that has not built a brand new roller coaster since 2001, will they actually do this? In my opinion, I just don't see it happening. Therefore, I'm gonna say that when Firebird reaches the end of its life cycle, which I can't imagine being too much longer really, the chain's gonna opt to just scrap the coaster altogether and not rebuild it because it's gonna cost a lot of money doing that, and they might find better use of this space. Now, we don't really have any specific idea as to what's the appropriate age, limit for a B&M coaster, like how long can they really last. But we see an Incredible Hulk run from 1999 through 2015, I believe. Then Universal decided to close it for about a year to rebuild it completely from the ground up. Now, obviously, Islands of Adventure is open every day of the year, and the Incredible Hulk runs, maybe 340 days a year, if not a little bit less, but very close to every day, and it's constantly running 2 or 3 trains, so the maintenance and wear and tear is definitely up there for a ride of that magnitude. So not every park's going to have the same timetable on the lifespan of their B&M coaster. So parks that are open more days of the year, then sure, the lifespan will be a little bit shorter, whereas a park that's open up, less time, is going to be a lot longer of a lifespan. Now, the next coaster on the list is Patriot at California's Great America, and this coaster's been in operation since 1991. And just like Iron Wolf, it is now a floorless coaster. The only difference is the coaster that was once known as Vortex has never been relocated. So is that beneficial or not? I really don't know that answer. It makes zero sense for Cedar Fair to invest on rebuilding this coaster, since obviously their plan for California's Great America is to close it forever in the coming years. Does it make sense to relocate it and rebuild it at the same time? No, because sadly, the 91-foot tall coaster that only features 2 inversions and a top speed of 45 miles an hour is just not that popular, and it will not be beneficial for Cedar Fair to do this. In 1992, B&M built Vortex at Carowinds. Now, this stand-up coaster out of the first 3 offered the best layout and best ride experience. And Vortex, unfortunately today, still features the stand-up trains, therefore I ride it once a year, and that's just about it. However, with that being said, will Cedar Fair decide to rebuild it or just scrap it? And obviously, let's scrap it, it's time. Though it's not going to be for a few more years, because I'm hearing that Cedar Fair just invested in a ton of money on the ride. I don't know why, do not look at me, I have no idea why. But apparently they're redoing their control system just like they did Nighthawk the previous year. I don't even know if it makes sense for Cedar Fair to rebuild this coaster and relocate it somewhere else and add floorless trains. The layout it's better than the first 2, but it just doesn't really do a whole lot. And I just don't think for marketing wise and return on investment it makes any sense at this point. B&M's most successful coaster was built in 1992 as well, and that was Batman the Ride, located at Six Flags Great America. Now for this, I'm going to include all the Batman clones, whether it's at a Six Flags park or not, for this prediction. And I'm going to say, I think it's a pretty safe bet, since how good these coasters are and how popular they are at their parks, that most of the parks, if not all, will choose to just rebuild the coaster altogether because, again, these things are people eaters and the general public love them. And let's face it, these layouts are amazing. And sadly, some of these coasters are the best coaster at the parks in 2023, 25 plus years after opening. That's how good these coasters really are. And I would argue this has to be considered one of the best coasters ever built that offers a height of 100 feet or less. In 1993, B&M took their inverted model to the next level when they opened up Flight Deck at California's Great America. And sadly, just like Patriot, I just do not see Cedar Fair rebuilding this coaster, even if they would relocate it, mainly because the terrain's a little bit different for this ride, where the ending helix is right over the water, so that might make it a little bit more difficult to relocate this coaster altogether. But the main reasoning is, as it will cost much less than building a brand new B&M inverted coaster for Cedar Fair just to rebuild this ride altogether, I just don't think it makes sense for the company, as well as there's other coaster models out there that you can get for around the same price that the general public will love just as much. Also opening in 1993 is Busch Gardens Tampa's Kumba. And as much, don't hate me for this, but if you go to Busch Gardens Tampa, the Kumba hardly ever has a line, which is odd because Kumba is one of the best coasters in the park. I mean, this thing is super intense. It offers 7 inversions and a great overall layout that includes a tunnel. So what is the catch for the park's 143 foot tall coaster? Why doesn't Kumba ever have a line? Because Congo Rapids is located even further back in the park, but yet that water ride always has a line. So again, is the problem with Kumba really the location, or is it something else? With that being said, as of right now, I'm leaning towards Busch Gardens Tampa, just scrapping Kumba altogether when the time comes, and I do believe soon, to make way for something new and exciting in the future. I hate to say it because I love Kumba, but again, it never has a line, and that really disturbs me as to why that is, because again, it's one of the best coasters in the park. In 1994, Cedar Point opened up Raptor, which instantly shattered all the records for an inverted roller coaster. So Cedar Point has to retract this coaster and rebuild it, right? I really think so, just because of how perfect Raptor is and how it fits great along the midway and interacts with other rides and attractions. You have to think of it like this. Is there a roller coaster out there today that would provide the same thrill and interact with park midways just as Raptor does? I mean, sure there might be, but why? Because Raptor, again, is so popular among park guests. This coaster always has a line usually, even though it's a people eater. Therefore, I predict Raptor is going to get rebuilt and it's going to be a part of the Cedar Point skyline for the next 40 or 50 years. Heading to Spain to visit Port Aventura, because they have a ride just like Kumba but a little bit larger called Dragon Kahn. And this coaster opened up in 1994 and features 8 inversions. You are looking at one of the most photogenic coasters ever built. This B&M sit-down coaster offers a height of 148 feet, features speeds of 65 miles an hour, and is perfectly placed within the park, especially now that Shambhala towers over this coaster. So I think it's safe to say that the park's going to just rebuild this coaster when the time does come. After the success of Raptor in 1994, Cedar Point decided to go stand-up in 1996 when they debuted Mantis, which is now obviously Rougarou, which, let's face it, is still a fairly popular coaster due to the line. I mean, this ride usually always has around a 15 to 30 minute wait every single day. But as for the future of the 4 inversion coaster, I just don't know if the future is at Cedar Point or not. I could very well see Cedar Fair rebuilding this coaster and relocating it to another park that needs a high capacity roller coaster that features inversions. Now, I could very well be wrong here and Cedar Fair decide to just scrap the ride altogether, but given its location at Cedar Point, I just do not feel as if the park needs to reinvest in this coaster to keep it around for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So as for Rougarou, I just do not see it lasting at Cedar Point once it reaches the end of its life cycle. Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa is arguably the best inverted coaster ever built, and it opened up in 1996. It's a great layout, it's a great centerpiece for the park, so therefore I predict that this coaster, unlike Kumba, is going to get retracked and rebuilt when Montu does reach the end of its life cycle. Now, while I do love Montu, I might be the only one who thinks this, but I believe that Afterburn at Carowinds is just a little bit better than Montu overall, but again, that's my opinion. But as for Montu, this coaster is placed wonderfully in the park. It dominates the Busch Gardens skyline, and the coaster is very popular among park guests. Therefore, it's going to get rebuilt, which is great for all of us. Now here's a fun fact that you probably did not know. Did you know that Raptor at Cedar Point actually has a clone? Yes, in 1996, a park in Japan built a roller coaster just like Raptor, which first opened at the now defunct Expo Land in Japan. This ride now operates as the largest coaster at its new park in France. And given the location of this park and it being located within 100 miles of Europa Park and Holiday Park in Germany, I really do feel as if the park would just opt to rebuild the coaster altogether instead of scrap it, and that's great because you are looking at one of the largest inverted coasters in all of Europe. Heading to Six Flags Great Adventure for the next one, and that is Green Lantern, which opened at the park in 2011, but relocated from Kentucky Kingdom when it was known as Chang. Opening 1 year after Cedar Point's Mantis, Kentucky Kingdom, before it was a Six Flags park, broke all the records the stand-up coaster offered with this new addition. While offering a pretty similar layout to Mantis, Chang offered 5 inversions and a better ending, not to mention was a little bit taller and faster than Mantis was. So what will Six Flags decide to do with this coaster that is now 25 years old? Well, when the time does come, I can see them relocating this coaster or scrapping it altogether. I personally think the only savings grace for this would be converting it to a floorless, and while Six Flags Great Adventure already has Medusa as a floorless, it doesn't make sense for the park. So again, maybe Six Flags will decide to relocate this coaster somewhere else and just rebuild it, or they'll remove it altogether and scrap it. But realistically, I can see Six Flags just scrapping the coaster altogether. Heading up to Busch Gardens Williamsburg for Alpengeist, and this B&M inverted coaster dominates the park skyline, and I think the obvious answer for this coaster is it's going to get rebuilt because SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment know how popular Alpengeist is, and I'm sure they want to keep it a part of Busch Gardens' coaster collection for decades and decades to come. So I really feel like this is definitely a no-brainer. Plus, if you look at the aerial view of the coaster, it just takes up a little slither of the park, and the way they placed it in with the rest of the park is actually really impressive. So I just don't feel as if it makes any sense for them to scrap this coaster altogether. And finally, we have the last coaster on my list, and fair warning, I'm gonna butcher this name, but it looks like it's pronounced Pyrenees. But anyways, it's located at a park in Japan that's themed to Spain, which is kind of odd. And this B&M inverted coaster, in my opinion, does not get talked about enough. Because just looking at its layout, this coaster looks legit. And I would go as far as saying if it was located here in America, this would be a top 5 B&M inverted coaster, if not top 3. But as for the park, this is the only extreme coaster out of the 4 that they offer. So will they decide to just remove it or rebuild it? And I'm actually 50-50 on this. I really feel as if they could possibly do both. I would hope that they just rebuild it, but you never know. So now that you know my predictions for every B&M coaster that's over 25 years old as to whether the park decides to rebuild it or just scrap the coaster when it does reach the end of its life cycle, let me know your predictions on your favorite B&M coaster. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to smile today, think positive, and of course, keep riding coasters.